I always found a certain solace in the open road. The lines on the asphalt became a monotonous rhythm, a meditative backdrop against which I could lose myself. It was the kind of detachment that freed the mind, allowing one to drift into thoughts both profound and trivial. I embarked on this journey without a particular destination, only a rough idea of weaving through the sun-scorched landscapes of Arizona and Nevada. A road trip that was as much about the journey as it was about escaping the unspoken weight tethered to my past. Each day bled seamlessly into the next, punctuated only by the necessity of rest at varied motels, each more nondescript than the last. They were places of transient acquaintances, but they had a peculiar allure. The motels stood like stand-ins for the human experience. On the surface, they seemed uniform, yet each room held whispers of countless stories, fragments of the lives that passed through them. It was during one of these overnight pauses, in a nondescript motel just off the highway in Arizona, that the first tremor of unease touched my otherwise calm voyage. I noticed a peculiar detail, something that might have slipped by unnoticed had I not been attuned to the serene monotony of my travels. A missing person flyer pinned to the bulletin board by the reception desk. I had seen such notices before, but there was something about this one that caught my eye. The woman in the photograph had an unsettling familiarity, though I was certain I had never seen her before. Her eyes, full of life and yet shadowed by some unseen worry, seemed to follow me as I checked in. Shrugging off the feeling as mere imagination, I settled into my room, the soft hum of the air conditioner a welcome melody in the desert heat. That night, sleep came uneasily. My dreams were a tangled mess of roads that led nowhere and faces I could never quite recognize, always slipping away into the shadows just as clarity threatened. I awoke with a start, my heart pounding with the disquiet of forgotten nightmares. The following day, I resumed my journey, the flyer nagging at the edges of my consciousness. The landscape outside my car window blurred into a haze of tan and blue, but my thoughts kept circling back, trying to place the woman's face. As evening approached, I found myself pulling into another motel, this time across the border into Nevada. The establishment was eerily similar to its predecessors, a mirror image with a few different details. As I approached the reception desk, my eyes landed on another missing person flyer. My heart skipped a beat. The woman was different, yet there was a haunting similarity, an almost otherworldly connection between the two. My mind raced with the implications. Was this a mere coincidence, or was there a pattern hidden beneath the surface of my journey? The clerk, a tired-looking man in his 50s, handed me my key with the same practiced disinterest I'd come to expect from those working the graveyard shift. I couldn't help but ask, do these flyers ever result in anything? Are people ever found? He glanced at the bulletin board, a flicker of something, maybe sadness or resignation, crossing his features. People go missing all the time around these parts. Some turn up, some don't. Most folks don't pay much mind to it. His words lingered long after I retreated to my room. I wondered about the lives these people had led before vanishing, the stories they left behind. I felt an inexplicable pull toward their mystery, as if deciphering their fates could somehow illuminate the darker corners of my own history. As the days turned to weeks, I continued my journey, an invisible thread leading me from one motel to another, each stop marked by yet another flyer. The faces accumulated in my mind, a gallery of the lost and forgotten. I scoured local news articles and online forums, piecing together fragments of their histories. A pattern began to form, one that painted a chilling portrait of disappearance and despair. Most of the missing had last been seen in or around similar motels, a trail that eerily mirrored my own path. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being pulled into something far larger than myself, a web of unseen forces that had begun to wrap around me. My curiosity had become an obsession, and in the quiet corners of my mind, fear began to take root. I was driven by the need to understand, to unravel the mystery that seemed to beckon me deeper with each passing mile. The escalation came unexpectedly during one particularly restless night in yet another indistinguishable motel. I awoke to a soft tapping at my door. the kind of sound that could be easily dismissed as the errant creak of an old building settling. But there it was again, insistent, deliberate. I rose from the bed, heart thundering in my chest, and approached the door with trepidation. Peering through the peephole, I saw nothing but the empty corridor, dimly lit and stretching into shadow. The instinct to open the door was tempered by a deeper sense of caution, so I turned away, convincing myself it was nothing more than the wind. But as I lay back down, my thoughts were a whirling tempest of unease. The following morning, I found a note slipped under the door. The handwriting was elegant yet hurried, the words a plea for help that chilled me to my core. "I know you can see them too," it read. "Please, don't stop. Don't let them take you like they did the others." The note was unsigned, its origins a mystery that only deepened the sense of foreboding. I felt as if I were on the precipice of something terrible, a hidden truth that threatened to engulf me. The road that once offered freedom now felt like a trap, each mile suffocating in its relentless progression toward an unseen climax. Determined to find answers, I drove on, the landscape shifting from the flat desolation of the desert to the jagged embrace of mountains. My mind was a storm of theories, each more implausible than the last, until I found myself at a place that seemed both familiar and alien, a motel nestled at the base of a mountain, its facade weary with the weight of time. The air was heavy with the scent of impending rain, a rare occurrence in these parts, and I could sense the electricity in the atmosphere. As I entered the lobby, my eyes were drawn, almost magnetically, to the bulletin board. It was empty, no missing persons, no faded memories, just a bare expanse of cork and pinholes. A new kind of fear gripped me, one that whispered of finality and fate. The absence was more unsettling than any presence could have been. The clerk, a woman whose age was difficult to determine, watched me with a knowing gaze, as if she had been expecting me. There was a weight to her stare that pinned me in place, and in that moment, I understood that my journey had led me to its inevitable conclusion. She spoke without preamble, her voice a soft echo that seemed to resonate with the building itself. "You've come far, haven't you? Searching for something, or perhaps trying to outrun it." I nodded, words failing me as the enormity of the situation settled over me like a shroud. "They won't let you leave now that you've seen them," she continued, her tone matter of fact yet tinged with an underlying sorrow. "You felt it, haven't you? The pull of this place?" I had felt it, though I hadn't understood it until now. The sense of being watched, the inexplicable familiarity, the faces on those flyers, all were threads in a tapestry of horrors woven into the fabric of this land. "What are they?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. "Lost souls," she replied, "drawn to those who wander, who search without knowing what they're truly seeking. They're neither dead nor alive, trapped in the spaces between. They'll claim you if you let them." The words hung in the air, a dire warning that reverberated through my very being. The realization hit me with the force of a gale. I had unwittingly become a part of this cycle, the hunter now prey to unseen predators. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dim light of my room, listening to the whispering wind outside, as if the very air carried the voices of the lost. I understood now that the road offered no escape, only a path deeper into the shadows that had claimed so many before me. As dawn broke, I made my decision. I couldn't stay, couldn't allow myself to be swept away by the currents that threatened to pull me under. I packed my things with a determined efficiency, my mind set on breaking free from the invisible chains that bound me to this place. As I drove away, the road stretched out before me, an uncertain future painted in shades of gray and gold. The faces from the flyers haunted my rearview mirror, a gallery of eyes that watched and waited. I didn't know if I was truly free or if the specters would follow, but I clung to the hope that I could outrun the shadows, if only for a little while longer. The lingering fear stayed with me, a constant companion on the lonely stretches of highway. The sense of unease became a part of who I was, a reminder of the darkness that lurked just out of sight. I knew that the road would always call to me, a siren song that promised both freedom and danger. But I had learned to listen to the quietest of warnings, the softest of whispers. and I vowed never to become another face on a forgotten flyer. The journey continued, each motel a fleeting refuge from the encroaching night, each mile a testament to the resilience of those who wander. I was a traveler, forever moving, forever searching, but now with the knowledge that some mysteries are better left unsolved, and that the true horror lies not in what is seen, but in what remains hidden in the shadows. The open road stretched out before me, an endless ribbon of asphalt weaving through the heart of America. I had been driving for days, my car packed with all my possessions, the hum of the tires on the road a constant companion. It was both exhilarating and exhausting, this journey to a new beginning. I was leaving behind the ghosts of my past, or so I thought, and seeking solace in the new life that awaited me across the country. The landscape shifted subtly as I drove, from the lush greenery of the East Coast to the rolling plains of the Midwest. Everything felt vast and empty, yet vibrantly alive. The sky was an endless dome of cerulean, dotted occasionally by cottony clouds that drifted lazily above. My journey had been uneventful, save for the occasional need to refuel or stop for a quick bite. I welcomed the solitude, the time to think, the chance to let go of the burdens I'd carried for far too long. It was during one of these moments of introspection, somewhere in the quiet stretches of Nebraska, that I saw him, a lone figure standing by the roadside. At first, I thought nothing of it. Hitchhikers were not uncommon, and my instinct was to drive past without a second glance. But there was something about him, a peculiar presence that seemed to reach out and grip me. His posture was oddly stiff, his thumb extended in a universal gesture for a ride. As I approached, I could see him more clearly, a young man, perhaps in his late 20s, with unkempt hair and wearing clothes that looked like they belonged to another era. Before I realized what I was doing, I found myself slowing down and pulling over onto the shoulder. The man approached my car with a deliberate slowness, his eyes, dark and unsettling, locked onto mine. I rolled down the window as he leaned in, a strange smile playing on his lips. "Thanks for stopping," he said, his voice soft yet carrying an undercurrent of something that set my nerves on edge. "I could use a lift." "Sure," I replied, hesitating for just a moment before unlocking the passenger door. "Where are you headed?" He slipped into the seat beside me, closing the door with a gentle click. "Just up the road a bit," he answered, his gaze fixed firmly on the horizon. It was as if he spoke not to me, but to some unseen entity that only he could perceive. I felt a chill despite the warmth of the afternoon sun. There was something not quite right about him, an air of otherworldliness that I couldn't quite shake, but I pushed the unease aside, focusing instead on the road ahead. We drove in silence for a while, the only sound the rhythmic drone of the engine. I stole glances at him occasionally, trying to make sense of the strange energy that seemed to emanate from him. His face was calm, yet there was a tension in his jaw, a flicker of something darker behind his eyes. "Do you travel often?" I asked, hoping to break the uneasy silence. "Often enough," he replied ambiguously, offering no further elaboration. The conversation faded, leaving behind a discomforting void that seemed to grow with each passing mile. The landscape outside became a blur, the road a hypnotic stream of dashed white lines. I felt myself drawn into a stupor, my eyelids growing heavy. Then, without warning, he spoke again, his voice slicing through the stillness. "You know, you should be careful on these roads. Not everything is as it seems." A sense of foreboding crept over me. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice betraying a hint of anxiety. He turned to me then, those unsettling eyes boring into mine. "There are things out here," he said slowly, deliberately. "Things that can lead you astray, make you see what isn't there." A tremor ran through me, a primal instinct warning me of danger. Yet, there was a part of me, curious, reckless, that wanted to understand more. "Have you seen these things?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. His response was a cryptic smile, one that sent a shiver coursing down my spine. "You could say that." I wanted to press him further, to demand he explain himself, but the words caught in my throat. A heavy silence settled over us once more, the weight of it suffocating. I was acutely aware of every breath, every heartbeat, the air in the car thick with unspoken tension. As we continued on, the sky above began to change, darkening with the approach of evening. Shadows stretched long across the landscape, and the temperature dropped perceptibly. I glanced at the clock on the dashboard. It was later than I had realized. "How much farther do you think you'll go?" I asked, eager to return to the safety of solitude. He seemed to consider the question for a moment, his eyes drifting to the window. "Not much farther," he said at last, his voice tinged with a strange finality. Just then, the car's engine sputtered, a sudden jerk that sent a jolt of alarm through me. The car began to slow, its power waning as the dashboard lights flickered ominously. I pulled over to the side of the road, my heart pounding in my chest. "Damn," I muttered, popping the hood and stepping out into the growing twilight. I was no mechanic, but I hoped it was a minor issue, a loose wire, perhaps, or a faulty connection. The hitchhiker followed me out, standing a few paces away, his presence a silent specter in the gathering gloom. "Need a hand?" he offered, though his tone was more amused than concerned. "No, I think I can manage," I replied, though I wasn't entirely convinced. I fiddled with the engine, my fingers clumsy in the fading light. Anxiety gnawed at me, a persistent whisper that something was very wrong. Behind me, the hitchhiker watched silently, an enigmatic figure silhouetted against the deepening night. The air felt charged, electric with tension, as if the world itself held its breath. Then came the sound, a low, mournful wail that seemed to rise from the depths of the earth. It echoed across the plains, an eerie lament that set every nerve on edge. My skin prickled with fear, my instincts screaming to flee. "What was that?" I asked, my voice trembling. He tilted his head, listening intently. "The wind," he replied, though there was a glint of mischief in his eyes. I knew it was more than that, something primal and ancient that defied explanation. The sensation of being watched, of unseen eyes tracking my every move, grew unbearable. Suddenly, the engine roared back to life, startling me. I slammed the hood shut, eager to leave this place and its unsettling mysteries behind. We climbed back into the car, and I accelerated away, the tires kicking up gravel in my haste. The hitchhiker settled back into his seat, his expression inscrutable. For a time, neither of us spoke. The road unfurled before us, illuminated by the beams of the headlights. I focused on driving, determined to shake off the lingering disquiet. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw him shift, turning to face me. "You're running from something," he said, his voice a soft accusation. I stiffened, caught off guard by the unexpected insight. "What makes you say that?" "You have the look of someone trying to outrun their past," he replied. "But the past has a way of catching up." His words struck a chord, piercing through the armor I had carefully constructed around myself. "What do you know about it?" I challenged, though my voice lacked conviction. He gazed at me with a solemn intensity. "I've seen it before. People trying to escape, thinking a change of scenery will solve everything. But you can't run from yourself." I felt exposed, vulnerable under his scrutiny. Yet, there was a kernel of truth in his words, a painful reminder of the ghosts I carried within. As if sensing my turmoil, he offered a small, almost comforting smile. "You're not alone, you know. We are all haunted by something." The admission hung between us, a fragile truce born of shared understanding. I breathed deeply, trying to calm the tumult within. Then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, the hitchhiker pointed to a spot up ahead. "This is where I get off," he said. I blinked, surprised by the abruptness of his departure. "Are you sure?" I asked, glancing at the darkened stretch of road. He nodded, already unfastening his seatbelt. "Thanks for the ride," he said, opening the door and stepping out into the night. I watched as he walked away, his figure slowly dissolving into the shadows. A strange sense of loss filled me, as if a part of me had gone with him. I drove on, the road a lonely expanse beneath the star-strewn sky. The silence was oppressive, the weight of unanswered questions pressing upon me. And then I saw it, a figure standing by the roadside, thumb extended. My heart skipped a beat as recognition dawned. It was him, the hitchhiker, exactly as he had been when I first encountered him. Panic surged through me, a visceral fear that threatened to consume me. I kept driving, refusing to look back, my mind racing with possibilities. Had I imagined it all? Was he even real? The doubts gnawed at me, eroding my sense of reality. The miles slipped by, and with them, my certainty. The road stretched endlessly ahead, a dark corridor that offered no answers, only more questions. Even when I finally reached my destination, the encounter lingered like a shadow, a haunting memory that refused to fade. I was safe, but the fear remained, a constant, gnawing presence at the edge of my consciousness. And somewhere, on some lonely stretch of highway, I imagined him still standing there, waiting for the next traveler, the next soul to ensnare in his web of mysteries. The open road was no longer a promise of freedom, but a reminder of the things we cannot escape, the phantoms that trail us no matter how far we run. And in the quiet moments, when the night pressed in and the world seemed still, I could almost hear his voice, whispering from the shadows. Not everything is as it seems. The highway stretched before me, weaving through the dense, dark forests of rural New Jersey. It was a familiar route, one that I had driven countless times on my way back from visiting my parents. The road, fringed with towering pines and cloaked in the dimming light of dusk, always managed to evoke a sense of calm and continuity. The familiarity was comforting, a routine part of my life in which nothing unexpected ever occurred. Yet, as I drove into the deepening twilight, I couldn't shake a sense of quiet unease that seemed to accompany the setting sun. As my car hummed along, I noticed a figure ahead, standing by the side of the road, thumb extended in the universal gesture of needing a lift. I slowed down almost instinctively, curiosity piqued by the unexpected presence of a hitchhiker on such a secluded stretch of highway. He was tall, with a lean frame, dressed in a dark, worn coat that flapped gently in the evening breeze. His face, though partially obscured by shadows, appeared calm, almost serene. I was not typically prone to picking up strangers, but something about this man felt oddly compelling. Against my better judgment, I pulled over onto the gravel shoulder. As he climbed into the passenger seat, his eyes met mine, a striking, pale blue that seemed to hold depths beyond comprehension. He settled in with surprising ease, as if this were a customary part of his evening routine. "Thank you for stopping," he said, his voice smooth, yet carrying a weight that suggested wisdom beyond his years. "Not many would." I nodded, focusing back on the road. "Where are you headed?" "Just a bit further down the road." "I'll know when I get there," he replied enigmatically, offering no further details. There was an eerie comfort in his lack of specificity, as though he inherently knew the journey was more significant than the destination. For the first few miles, silence enveloped us, thick and heavy, broken only by the rhythmic thrum of tires against asphalt. I found myself stealing glances at him, trying to discern more about this mysterious passenger. Despite his unassuming appearance, there was something undeniably captivating about him, a presence that both intrigued and unsettled me. "You know," he began, breaking the silence, "this road has seen many travelers, each with their own stories and secrets." I nodded, unsure of where he was leading the conversation. "I guess that's true for most roads." He turned his head slightly, those piercing eyes meeting mine again. "Yes, but not all roads are quite like this one. This place holds echoes of the past and whispers of the future. It's a crossroads of sorts." His words lingered in the air between us, carrying an unsettling weight. I felt a shiver run down my spine despite the warmth inside the car. There was a depth to his gaze that seemed to strip away layers of pretense, exposing truths I wasn't ready to face. "Do you believe in fate?" he asked suddenly, his voice cutting through my swirling thoughts. I hesitated, surprised by the abruptness and intimacy of the question. "I'm not sure," I replied cautiously. "I like to think we have some control over our paths." He nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps, but sometimes the road has a way of guiding us, showing us things we are meant to see, whether we're ready or not." There was a certainty in his voice that left little room for doubt. I felt an inexplicable urge to challenge him, to question this strange philosophy he seemed to embrace, yet something held me back. Instead, I focused on the road, now winding its way deeper into the heart of the forest, the trees on either side closing in like silent, watchful sentinels. As night descended, the headlights struggled to pierce the thickening darkness. The world outside seemed to shrink, leaving only the narrow ribbon of road illuminated before us. My unease grew, a gnawing sensation that something was about to happen, something that would challenge my understanding of reality. The hitchhiker shifted in his seat, drawing my attention back to him. There are things we cannot see, forces that shape our lives in ways we might never comprehend. I felt a chill steal over me, a premonition of sorts, as though his words were more than idle musing. "What do you mean?" I asked, unable to mask the tremor in my voice. "Tonight, you will see," he said simply, his gaze fixed on the road ahead. "But remember, not all is as it seems." His cryptic warning hung between us, heavy with portent. I wanted to dismiss it, to laugh it off as the ramblings of an eccentric traveler. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that he spoke from experience, from knowledge beyond the ordinary. We drove on, the silence between us pregnant with unspoken truths. I kept my eyes on the road, half expecting something to leap out from the shadows. But as the minutes ticked by and nothing happened, my tension began to ebb, replaced by a growing curiosity about the man beside me. "How do you know so much about this road?" I asked, hoping to draw him into conversation. He smiled, a faint, enigmatic curve of his lips. "I've traveled it many times, in many different ways." My curiosity deepened, but before I could probe further, something caught my attention. Off to the side, barely visible in the dim light, was a car, its hazard lights blinking weakly. I slowed down, instinctively checking to see if anyone needed help. The hitchhiker nodded towards the car, his expression unreadable. "This is where I get off," he said, though there was no recognition in his voice, no indication that he knew the occupants of the stranded vehicle. I pulled over, the gravel crunching beneath the tires. He opened the door and stepped out, pausing to glance back at me. "Remember what I said," he intoned, those pale eyes holding mine for a heartbeat longer than necessary. "Trust in what you see tonight." With that, he closed the door and walked towards the stranded car. I watched him go, the darkness quickly swallowing his form as he approached the vehicle. My instinct was to drive away, to leave this strange encounter behind, but something compelled me to stay. Moments later, a woman emerged from the car, her face pale and drawn, illuminated by the feeble glow of the hazard lights. She seemed distressed, gesturing towards the hitchhiker with urgency. I couldn't hear their conversation, but the tone was unmistakably tense. I watched, torn between the urge to intervene and the instinct to remain an observer. The hitchhiker turned towards me once more, nodding as if to reassure me. I felt a peculiar sense of calm wash over me, a certainty that everything was unfolding as it should. As the woman continued to speak, her voice rising with emotion, the hitchhiker placed a hand on her shoulder, speaking softly. Gradually, her agitation seemed to dissipate, replaced by a tentative acceptance. I marveled at his ability to bring peace in such a charged moment, wondering if there was more to him than met the eye. Eventually, he turned back towards the road, signaling that it was time for me to leave. I nodded, the unspoken understanding passing between us like an invisible thread. As I pulled away, I glanced back through the rearview mirror, watching the scene recede into the distance. The rest of the journey passed in a blur, my mind replaying the events of the evening. The hitchhiker's words echoed in my thoughts, a haunting refrain that refused to be silenced. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been part of something extraordinary, a fleeting intersection of lives shaped by forces unseen. By the time I reached home, the clock had edged past midnight. I sat in the driveway for a moment, gathering my thoughts before heading inside. The house was dark and silent, a comforting contrast to the night's eerie events. I moved through the familiar spaces, seeking solace in their normalcy. Yet, as I lay in bed, sleep eluded me. My mind kept returning to the hitchhiker, to the strange encounter that felt more like a dream than reality. Who was he, and how had he known so much about the road, about the night? I couldn't shake the sensation that I had glimpsed a fragment of a larger story, a mystery that remained tantalizingly out of reach. As the days passed, the memory of that night refused to fade. I found myself driving the same route more often, hoping to encounter the hitchhiker again, to seek answers to the questions that haunted me. But each journey ended in disappointment, the road stretching empty and unremarkable before me. Despite this, a lingering fear clung to my thoughts, a subtle reminder that the world was not always as it seemed. The hitchhiker's warning stayed with me, a quiet whisper at the edge of perception. Trust in what you see, he had said. But what if what I saw was only part of the truth? The ordinary routine of life resumed, but a part of me remained vigilant, attuned to the possibility of the extraordinary lurking beneath the surface of the everyday. The hitchhiker's presence, though fleeting, had left an indelible mark on my consciousness, a reminder of the mysteries that lay hidden on the roads we travel. I never did see him again, yet his words continued to resonate, shaping my understanding of fate and destiny. Perhaps there was a reason our paths crossed, a purpose I might never fully comprehend. But one thing was certain, my perspective had shifted. The boundaries of my world expanded by the encounter on that dark, lonely highway. In the end, I came to accept that some mysteries are not meant to be solved. They exist to remind us of the unseen forces that shape our lives, the delicate interplay of chance and choice. And somewhere, on an unremarkable stretch of road in rural New Jersey, a hitchhiker with eyes like the sky continued his journey, carrying secrets only he could understand. There's a strange comfort that comes with driving along a highway at night. The hum of the tires on the pavement, the rhythmic flashing of the passing reflectors, and the vast, enveloping darkness create a cocoon of solitude. It's like being in a world suspended between destinations, a place where thoughts can drift without interruption. The headlights carve out a tunnel of visibility, illuminating the road ahead, while the rest of the world remains a mystery. That's where I found myself on a cool autumn evening, the air crisp with the promise of winter. I'd been driving for hours, my mind wandering between the mundane and the extraordinary, finding solace in the steady monotony of the journey. The highway stretched infinitely ahead of me, a ribbon of asphalt leading to nowhere in particular. There was something almost meditative about it, a chance to escape the pressing concerns of everyday life. I was on my way to visit an old friend from college, someone I hadn't seen in years, but had recently reconnected with over social media. Our conversation had been filled with nostalgia and a shared yearning to meet up and reminisce about the simpler days. The trip seemed like a good idea, a brief respite from the demands of work and the noise of city life. The first sign that something was amiss came in the form of a peculiar hitchhiker standing by the side of the road. It was past midnight, and the figure was illuminated by the harsh glow of my headlights. A man, dressed in an old-fashioned suit and hat, raising his thumb in the universal gesture for a lift. He seemed out of place, an anachronism stranded in the modern world. I slowed down, curiosity piqued. It wasn't often you saw hitchhikers these days, especially not ones who looked like they'd stepped out of a noir film. Against my better judgment, I pulled over, rolling down the passenger window enough to speak without making myself too vulnerable. Need a ride? I asked cautiously, assessing him through the dim light. He nodded, his face obscured by the shadow of his hat's brim. If it's not too much trouble, he replied, his voice smooth and cultured, with an accent I couldn't quite place. Against the better judgment I knew I should have adhered to, I unlocked the door. There was something about him, a magnetic pull that made it difficult to refuse. He settled into the seat, closing the door with a quiet finality. Where are you headed? I inquired as we resumed our journey, the sense of normalcy slipping ever so slightly. Nowhere and everywhere, he replied cryptically, offering no further clarification. His presence was unsettling, a disruption in the serene bubble I constructed. Yet, I felt compelled to continue. The highway stretched on, and the conversation drifted into silence. I tried to focus on the road, the familiar rhythm of the drive, but there was an undercurrent of tension now. a feeling of being watched. Every so often, I'd glance at him from the corner of my eye, only to find him looking straight ahead, expression unreadable. It was then that I noticed the rest stop sign approaching, a beacon of light in the oppressive darkness. I hadn't realized how much I needed a break until it appeared. Mind if we stop for a bit? I asked, trying to sound casual. His response was a simple nod, and I took the exit, the car rumbling over the uneven pavement of the rest stop parking lot. It was a typical roadside oasis, complete with vending machines and a small, dimly lit bathroom. I parked and stepped out, stretching my legs with a sense of relief. The hitchhiker followed, standing a little distance away, watching me with an intensity that set my nerves on edge. I tried to shake off the feeling, convincing myself it was just the late hour and the strange circumstances playing tricks on my mind. It was as I approached the vending machines that he spoke again, his voice low and almost conspiratorial. Do you ever wonder about the choices we make on the road? The paths we take, the people we meet? His words hung in the air, laden with an implication I couldn't quite grasp. I suppose, I replied, uncertain where this was leading. There are rules, you know, he continued, unwritten, but binding all the same. I didn't respond immediately, my mind racing to decipher his meaning. The rest stop felt eerily quiet now, the oppressive silence pressing against us like a living thing. Would you like to learn more about these rules? He asked, his eyes catching the dim light with an unsettling gleam. There was a part of me that screamed to refuse, to get back into the car and drive away, but curiosity had its claws in me. What do you mean? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He stepped closer, his presence both magnetic and repelling at once. Every traveler has a choice, he explained, a chance to understand the nature of their journey, but it comes with a cost. A cost, I echoed, the words feeling heavy on my tongue. A glimpse beyond the veil, he said, his tone almost reverent. A bargain, if you will. The air seemed to thicken, charged with an energy that made my skin prickle. I should have walked away, should have retreated to the safety of my car, but something kept me rooted to the spot. There was a gravity to the moment, a sense that this was a crossroad unlike any other. And what is the cost? I asked, my voice barely audible. He smiled then, a slow, knowing smile that sent a shiver down my spine. A piece of your soul, he replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I recoiled instinctively, the absurdity of the statement clashing with the undeniable weight of his words. That's ridiculous, I stammered, trying to inject some levity into the situation. Is it? He countered, his gaze unwavering. Is it truly? I wanted to dismiss him, to laugh off the encounter as some bizarre, late-night hallucination, but the air felt charged with a truth I couldn't comprehend. There was a part of me that wanted to understand, to unravel the mystery he presented, even if it was beyond reason. I shook my head, attempting to clear the fog that had settled over my thoughts. I should get going, I mumbled, hoping to break the spell. He didn't stop me as I turned away, heading back to the car with an urgency I hadn't realized I possessed. The rest stop felt oppressive now, the shadows lengthening with each step I took. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking with an inexplicable fear. The hitchhiker remained where he was, watching with an intensity that burned into my mind. The road is a strange place, he called after me, his voice carrying on the night air, full of surprises and secrets. I didn't respond, didn't dare look back. I got into the car, started the engine, and pulled away from the rest stop, the tires spitting gravel in my haste. The highway was a welcome sight, a return to the familiar, but the feeling of unease lingered, a shadow that refused to lift. The rest of the drive passed in a blur, the sense of normalcy shattered by the encounter. The hitchhiker's words echoed in my mind, refusing to be dismissed. There was something unsettling about the way he'd spoken, the certainty in his tone that made it impossible to brush off as mere fantasy. When I finally arrived at my friend's house, the sight of the warmly lit windows was a balm to my frayed nerves. The familiar comfort of companionship and shared memories offered a temporary reprieve from the unsettling experience on the road. But even as I settled into the embrace of friendship and nostalgia, the encounter remained with me, a lingering shadow in the recesses of my mind. I found myself returning to the highway in my thoughts, to the hitchhiker's cryptic words and the strange energy that had surrounded us at the rest stop. It wasn't until the drive back, days later, that the full weight of the encounter would settle on me. The highway felt different now, the comforting solitude replaced by an undercurrent of anticipation. I found myself scanning the horizon for any sign of the hitchhiker, wondering if he'd appear again to offer more of his unsettling wisdom. The rest stop loomed in the distance, a familiar landmark now tarnished with the memory of our encounter. As I approached, I felt a strange pull to stop, to give in to the curiosity that had been simmering since that night. I pulled off the highway once more, the car rumbling over the same uneven pavement. The rest stop was just as I remembered, the vending machines humming quietly, the bathroom lights flickering intermittently. But this time, it felt different, as if the air was charged with an anticipation I couldn't quite place. I waited, heart pounding with a mixture of dread and curiosity, and sure enough, the hitchhiker emerged from the shadows, a spectral figure in his old-fashioned suit and hat. "You returned," he observed, his voice carrying a note of satisfaction. "I needed answers," I replied, the words feeling heavy with the weight of the unknown. He nodded, as if he'd expected this outcome all along. "The road is a place of bargains, of choices made and consequences faced. And the rules?" I pressed, wanting to grasp the truth that seemed just out of reach. "They bind us all," he said, his tone solemn. "Travelers, wanderers, seekers of truth, each must pay for the knowledge they seek." A silence stretched between us, the rest stop a silent witness to our exchange. I felt a strange sense of acceptance then, a recognition that the road held secrets I was only beginning to understand. "And what if I'm not willing to pay the price?" I asked, my voice steady despite the turmoil within. His smile was enigmatic, a flicker of something ancient and knowing. "Then the journey ends, and the answers remain out of reach." I thought about that for a long moment, the weight of the decision settling over me like a shroud. The road stretched out before me, a path of uncertainty and unanswered questions. In the end, I chose to walk away, to return to the car in the safety of the known. But the hitchhiker's words stayed with me, a reminder that the road was more than just a means to an end. It was a place of mystery and magic, of choices and consequences that defied the ordinary. As I drove away, the rest stop receded in the rearview mirror, a ghostly reminder of the world beyond the veil. The highway beckoned, the road unfurling before me like a tapestry of untold stories, each mile a testament to the unseen forces that governed our lives. The journey continued, but I knew that I would never be the same. The unwritten rules of the road had imprinted themselves on my soul, a haunting realization that lingered long after the encounter had passed. And so, I drove on, the hum of the tires a constant reminder of the path I had chosen, the path that stretched endlessly into the unknown. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the endless stretch of rural highway. I was en route to a small town nestled in the valley beyond the hills, a place I used to visit as a child. The road was familiar, yet time had altered its face, adding patches of gravel and clusters of wildflowers that leaned toward the pavement as if seeking warmth. The air was crisp, carrying the faint smell of pine and earth, a refreshing change from the congested city atmosphere I'd left behind. My car, a reliable old sedan, hummed along without complaint. It had seen many roads and now seemed content to glide down this quiet stretch. The quiet was comforting, as if the universe was giving me permission to just be. Yet, as fate would have it, tranquility rarely lasts. A sudden jolt interrupted my thoughts. The car sputtered, coughed, and then, as if succumbing to an invisible ailment, rolled to a stop. I was stranded in the middle of nowhere, miles from the nearest town, with nothing but the whispering pines and an occasional bird call to keep me company. Stepping out, I surveyed the empty road, feeling the weight of isolation settle in. I popped the hood, pretending I knew what I was doing. The engine was a mass of metal and wires, a foreign entity that breathed life into my journeys. But today, it seemed to have taken its last breath. Panic threatened to creep in, but I pushed it aside. There was a sense of adventure in the unexpected, I reminded myself. Besides, help was likely just a phone call away. Reaching for my phone, I winced as I realized the signal bars were missing, replaced by an ominous, no service message. Fate had a dark sense of humor, it seemed. With no other option, I began to walk, following the road in hope of finding a hint of civilization. Minutes turned into an hour before I spotted a sign, aged and weathered by the elements. It read, Bill's Auto Repair 2 miles. It was a beacon of hope in an otherwise bleak landscape. I quickened my pace, the thought of a mechanic filling me with relief. The shop appeared like a mirage, nestled by the side of the road, surrounded by rusting hulks of cars long forgotten. A small, scruffy dog lay in the dirt outside the entrance, raising its head lazily as I approached. It was a peculiar sight, a guardian of this mechanical graveyard. The door creaked as I entered, the smell of oil and metal engulfing me. The interior was dimly lit, cluttered with tools and parts, a mechanical jungle. At the counter stood a man, his back facing me. He was tall, with a build that suggested years of hard labor. His hair was as disheveled as the shop itself, a wild mop of graying curls. Hello? I called out, breaking the silence. The man turned slowly, revealing a face that was surprisingly kind, marked by a lifetime of sun and toil. His eyes crinkled at the corners, warm and welcoming. Afternoon, he greeted in a voice like gravel. What can I do for you? My car broke down a couple of miles back. I explained, my voice tinged with urgency. I was hoping you could help. He nodded, wiping his hands on a rag that seemed to have seen better days. Bill's the name. You got lucky. Most folks don't find their way here unless they really need to. There was something reassuring about him, a calmness that seemed to anchor the chaos around him. He grabbed a set of keys from the wall and gestured for me to follow. We drove back to my car in an old tow truck, the dog seated comfortably between us, its head out the window, tongue lolling in the breeze. It was a strange little trio, but it felt right. Bill worked in silence once we reached my car, his hands moving with practiced ease as he inspected the engine. Looks like your fuel pump's gone, he concluded after a thorough examination. Not to worry, I've got a spare back at the shop. We'll get you sorted. Relief flooded me, mixed with gratitude. As we towed the car back, the sky began to darken, speckled with the first stars of evening. The rural quietude took on a more profound depth in the twilight, and I found myself pondering the lives of those who chose such seclusion. At the shop, Bill worked diligently, his dog occasionally padding over to offer moral support by sticking its snout into the toolbox or nudging his elbow. The companionship between man and dog was heartwarming, a silent testament to unspoken bonds. As I waited, I wandered around the shop, examining the various relics of machinery that littered the space. Each had its own story, I imagined, tales of journeys interrupted, much like my own. There was a peculiar charm to the place, a sense of history and continuity, as if time flowed differently here. All done, Bill announced at last, wiping his hands. She should run just fine now. A wave of gratitude washed over me, for his skill, his kindness, and the fortuitous meeting. Thank you, I said, meaning it more than he could know. Bill shrugged modestly, a man who knew his worth yet carried it lightly. It's what I do. But hey, if you don't mind some advice, the highway's not always as empty as it seems. Keep an eye out for things that don't fit. His words lingered in the air, cryptic and unsettling. I nodded, unsure how to respond. Outside, the dog barked once, a sharp note that pierced the quiet. As I prepared to leave, Bill's demeanor shifted. He seemed distracted, his eyes darting towards the windows as if seeing something beyond the glass and steel of his domain. Just remember, not everything that's broken needs fixing, he said, almost to himself. I drove away under the pale light of the moon, the road unspooling before me like a ribbon. The car purred contentedly, Bill's handiwork evident with every mile. Yet his parting words clung to me, an enigmatic echo that refused to fade. The night deepened, and I found solace in the rhythm of the drive, until the headlights caught something unusual by the roadside. A figure stood there, indistinct and shadowed. My heart skipped, and then steadied as I realized it was just an old scarecrow, tattered and weather-beaten. It seemed out of place, a reminder of the fields that lay beyond, dormant in the night. The journey continued, the road a silent witness to my passage. I couldn't shake the sense of being watched, a prickling at the back of my neck that intensified with every mile. The darkness seemed to press in, a living thing that breathed and shifted with each turn. Finally, the lights of the town appeared, a welcome sight after the oppressive solitude of the highway. Relief washed over me as I entered the familiar streets, now bathed in the soft glow of street lamps. I parked outside the inn where I had planned to stay, exhaustion seeping into my bones. Inside, the warmth of the lobby embraced me, the quiet murmur of other guests a soothing balm. I checked in, grateful for a bed and a chance to rest. As I lay down, fatigue quickly overtook me, drawing me into a restless sleep. But even in dreams, Bill's words haunted me, the notion that some things should remain unfixed playing over and over. I awoke with a start, the echo of barking ringing in my ears. The dog, I thought, recalling its watchful gaze. Morning came, the sun rising with the promise of a new day. I prepared to leave, feeling rejuvenated but with an undercurrent of unease still lurking beneath the surface. The innkeeper, a sprightly woman with a welcoming smile, waved me off. As I drove out of town, I couldn't resist taking one last look at the road. The scarecrow was no longer there, the space it had occupied now empty and unremarkable. The realization sent a shiver through me, a stark reminder that the world was full of mysteries better left unexplored. On the road again, I felt a strange mix of freedom and trepidation. The car moved smoothly, a testament to Bill's skill, and I focused on the journey ahead. But as the miles slipped by, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had crossed some unseen boundary, that my time on the highway had changed me in ways I couldn't yet comprehend. Back in the city, life resumed its usual pace, the memories of the trip fading into the background of daily routine. Yet, the encounter with Bill and his dog lingered, a shadow on the periphery of my thoughts. It was more than just a breakdown, more than a chance meeting. It was a reminder that the world was full of hidden depths and that sometimes the things we encounter have a way of finding us again, in moments of quiet reflection or unexpected solitude. And so, I kept a watchful eye on the road and the shadows it harbored, aware of the unspoken stories that lay just out of sight, waiting to reveal themselves when least expected. The highway, with its secrets and silent guardians, had left its mark on me, a subtle but indelible sign that I would carry with me always.